I'd like to give you a little perspective about what you're going to hear and to explain its particular relevance to the town of Lincoln. The Declaration of Independence is, of course, the founding document of our country, the cornerstone of our American democratic system. It is why we celebrate the 4th of July. It has profound significance for every American, but even more so for the citizens of Lincoln, where the revolution began along Battle Road on April 19th, 1775. And remember, that was more than a year before the Declaration of Independence was written. The Declaration of Independence may be the most important expression of the philosophy of government and the principles of liberty ever written in the history of mankind. For more than 2 centuries, it has served as inspiration for liberty and independence throughout the world. And still today, it serves as a beacon for those seeking justice and freedom from oppressive governments. The principles it espouses remain as vibrant and as relevant today as when they were written 242 years ago. As you listen, please reflect on the principles of liberty and representative government that we so often take for granted. Pay attention to the elegant language and the reasoning, which quite simply says, if you are going to declare independence, you owe it to the world to explain why. Here's why. Here's what the government is supposed to be, and here's how the king has abused it. We have repeatedly sought redress and been rebuffed. Therefore, we are justified in declaring our independence. Pay particular attention to the litany of abuses suffered at the hands of King George. Much of this refers to specific events that were felt here in Lincoln and in Massachusetts at that time. You should be able to make out the foundation and framing timbers of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, which were still more than a decade away. So, ladies and gentlemen, please turn the clock back 242 years to July 1776. It has been 14 long months since about 110 members of Lincoln's Minutemen and militia companies marched to Concord on April 19th, and since the ensuing battle raged through Lincoln like a firestorm. Lincoln's fathers and sons continue to serve through the Battle of Bunker Hill and the fortification of Dorchester Heights last spring. Now, in July of 1776, nearly 50 of our men and boys are still away at war defending Ticonderoga and New York City against powerful Crown forces. As good citizens of the town, you were present at town meeting just 10 days ago on June 24th, when here in Lincoln we voted to support our Continental Congress with our lives and fortunes if, for the safety of the United American Colonies, they should declare independence from Great Britain. Well, now they have. Citizens, patriots, champions of liberty, this proclamation has just arrived from Philadelphia. In Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident: that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let fact be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of people unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has given his assent to acts of pretended legislation for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefit of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond the seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely unparalleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. At every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states. That they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. And that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Ladies and gentlemen, in the words of the Honorable John Adams, let us commemorate this day of independence with deliverance, with pomp and parade, with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations, from one end of this continent to the other, from this time forward, forevermore. Fire!